Heavy rain stopped Ray's golf game as soon as it started. He and the rest of his team stayed outside the clubhouse for a while to see if the rain would let up, but it was clear that it would not. He was disappointed because he really enjoyed playing, and it was the best source of exercise for the week. Of course, it wasn't just heart disease that limited his activity. At age 64, such activities would have been limited anyway. He was still in good shape. He watched what he ate and still did most of the yard work in the modest home he shared with his wife Josie, who had lived with him for 40 years. And so Ray found himself walking through his door a little after 9 a.m., not 12:30 a.m. as he usually did when he came home. He didn't warn his wife about his early arrival. He didn't see the need to do so, and had never done so before when something like this happened. He would just explain when he got home. But he quickly forgot about why he had come early as soon as he opened the front door. And he forgot because there was his wife standing in the hallway. In her 59 years, Josie was still a very attractive woman. She wore her dark blonde hair shoulder length. She looked up when he walked through the door, and instead of taking on a guilty look as he expected, she smiled as she always did, expressing her happiness that he was home. Then, to his surprise, she stepped forward to greet him. "Hello, darling. You're home early." Josie moved to kiss him, but Ray managed to quickly move his head out of the way. His wife looked at him bewildered. "Are you out of your mind, Josie? What's worse is that I don't know where your mouth was. I have a pretty good idea where it was," explained Ray. Josie looked back at the young man, seemingly oblivious to his presence, and realized what she had almost done. "Oh, Ray, of course, I'm sorry. Honey, this is Luke. Luke, this is my husband, Ray." Luke was an inch shorter than Ray, but had the strong build of an active young man in his late 20s or early 30s. He had probably been an athlete in college, or maybe he still was. He had dark brown hair, cut short, and a plain face, neither handsome nor ugly. He stepped forward, and his hand came down on Ray's shoulder. Ray was tempted to respond physically, but held back for now. "It's nice to meet you. Josie's told me a lot about you. And don't worry, I'm sure in 25 or 30 years I'll have the same equipment problems you have, and I hope I'll treat it as calmly as you do." In response to Luke's slight smile, Ray grinned. Who the hell was this asshole to be so condescending to him? But he didn't want to go to jail, so he held back his fervor again. "Luke, get out of my house. And if I catch you in it one more time, one of us is going in a body bag, and I have a gun." The slight smile suddenly disappeared from Luke's face, and he took a step back, then stepped around Ray and headed for the front door. "Hey, it's okay. I thought you didn't mind." Ray closed the door, threw a brief glance at his wife, and headed for his bedroom. He was incredibly angry and puzzled that his wife didn't seem remorseful or even concerned about what had just happened. She entered the room shortly after he did. "That was rude." Ray turned to her, perplexed that she was finding fault with his behavior after what she had just done. He wasn't going to talk to her right now, but this was getting way out of line. "Was that rude? I walk into my house and see you walking some kid to the door that you clearly had something with, and I'm being rude. You really are out of your mind." Josie's face softened. She walked over to him and tried to put her hand on her husband's shoulder, but he pulled away as soon as he felt her touch. "Darling, I'm sorry, but it was so long ago. What we did was good and I enjoyed it, but it just doesn't fulfill my needs." "Perhaps that would be good information to share with me. Where the hell did you find this guy?" "He's a friend of Marjorie's." "A friend? He's half her age." And she was a single woman at the time. When she met Oscar, she gave up on him, but she and I talked about him, and she gave me his information. "You realize he's just using you for easy entertainment?" "Actually, he explained that he likes older women," Josie replied. "When he was 18, his mother made him help the neighborhood women around the house. Some of them couldn't afford to pay much, so they paid differently. He says he got to the point where women his age didn't suit him." "How long has this been going on?" asked Ray. "A few months. When you leave for a round of golf, he comes and courts me. He's always gone a long time, and I clean everything up before you get home. It doesn't affect you in any way. You get your fill, and I get mine, so to speak." Ray suddenly realized why Saturday had become bed linen change day. Well, I don't care if you think it doesn't affect me just because I'm not here. I won't put up with it, and I'll give up golf if I have to. Raymond, please, be reasonable. You need your golf game. It's the only physical activity you have. And I have needs that need to be met and taken care of in the meantime. That makes sense. Maybe for you, Josephine, but not for me. This was the last time. With those words, Ray made his way to his bedroom to shower and change into something more casual. Josie went into her closet to put on some clothes, then left the house and drove a few miles to the house where Christine lived with her husband and 2 daughters, Josie's granddaughters. By the time Ray had showered and dressed, the house was empty. There was no note, and he assumed his wife just wanted to get away from him. That suited him just fine, since he wanted the same thing. The shower calmed him down and he tried to reason logically. He could understand that Josie still had needs, but this was too much. He would never do what she did if their positions were reversed, and he didn't feel like he'd crossed the line. She would just have to get over it. Next chapter. The next day, Sunday, was the 4th of July, and the entire local family gathered for lunch to cook and then to gather again in the evening at a large public park for fireworks. This tradition had been around since Christine was a child, and Ray looked forward to it every year. In the morning, Ray got busy preparing the meat. He marinated the chicken and hamburgers and laid out hot dogs for the younger children who would be joining them for the feast. By the time the guests started arriving, everything was ready, and Ray was looking forward to spending time with his family. The barbecue went smoothly. Many friends were there, and Josie looked radiant, smiling and laughing. He was certainly upset that he'd caught her with another man, but she'd been a wonderful wife for 4 decades, and that could be forgiven. This time. As the guests began to leave the house, Ray decided to take a nap. His heart was limiting his stamina, and he wanted to be ready for tonight's fireworks. He kissed his wife on the cheek, let her know he was going to lie down for a while, and headed for the bedroom. When the alarm clock rang a couple hours later, he felt full of energy. The rest had done him good, and now he could enjoy the fireworks in peace. He changed into clean clothes and made his way to the living room. Around the dining room table sat members of his immediate family. His wife at the far end, his granddaughters, Julia 19 and Allison 17, at the back, Christine's husband Eric at the side, and Christine herself standing in front of the table, closest to Ray. Ray's son Leo and his wife Rebecca sat at the other end of the table, across from Julia and Allison. They were all looking at him. Ray realized immediately that this was about interference. What is it? His daughter Christine was obviously the spokesperson for the group. We wanted to talk to you about Mom? Ray looked at his wife, but her expression was calm. He hoped it wasn't what he thought it was. He looked at his daughter again. What about Mom? Mom told us about Luke. Told you, huh? Asked Ray, disbelief audible in his voice. Yes. And about your problems? Ray just stared at his wife, shocked that she would share such personal information with anyone, let alone their children and grandchildren. My problems, and indeed this whole story, are none of your business. But Mom's happiness is our business. So you're not happy? Asked Ray, addressing his wife directly. Yes, Ray, I am happy. Please don't think you're not, Josie replied. But she has needs, Daddy, the daughter interjected, and that's not something you can take care of. That's the way it is, isn't it? So you think I'm being unreasonable then? Selfishly by not agreeing to this? We're not trying to label it, Dad. We're just... Look, all we want to say is that since you can't do it, we think you ought to be more favorable to having Mom discreetly take care of this on her own. Ray looked around at the members of his family. Every single one of them were, or at least seemed to be, supportive of his wife being allowed to cheat on him. He may not have changed physically, but in those few seconds, Ray felt he had mentally and emotionally aged 20 years. He'd never felt as useless an old man as he did now. And, he said with difficulty, do you all feel that? He looked them all in the eye, and they nodded in agreement. But Ray thought it was too easy for anyone to just agree. He wanted to make sure of it as best he could. "Leo, do you agree with this?" asked Ray, looking his son in the eye. "Yeah, I mean, not that you're here," his son replied. "And it'll help Mom." "Eric?" asked Ray, turning to his son-in-law, Christine's husband. Ray had never known him to go against his wife, and certainly didn't expect him to start doing it now. "I don't think this is going to be a big problem, Ray." "Rebecca?" said Ray, catching a glance from his sister-in-law, who seemed to be almost hiding behind Leo. "Oh, Dad, I don't really," she said, trying to evade answering. Ray had always found it interesting that even after 20 years, Eric still called him by his first name, while Rebecca had almost immediately started calling him Daddy. "Nonsense, Rebecca. You've been a member of this family for 3 years now. Besides, you're a grown woman, and I'd be interested in your opinion." "Well, it seems like it would be okay. I mean, as long as she's careful and cautious." Finally, it came to his granddaughters. They were of a very different generation, and he suspected they had a very different attitude. Infidelity in marriage seemed commonplace, almost expected these days, but he still doubted they would go against him. They had spent so many wonderful hours together. He often attended concerts and constantly pampered them at the mall. Would they really go against him? "What about you girls?" "Oh, Grandpa, we don't have to be a part of this." "Oh, come on. You're both adults. Well, almost. And I'm sure you have some thoughts." Julia and Allison looked at each other, then at Mom and Dad, who seemed to be urging them to speak up. At that moment, Ray realized what they were about to say. Whether they believed it or not, Mom had clearly convinced them to speak out in favor of Grandma. "Well, I mean," Julia, the oldest, said, "that a lot of our friends don't mind their boyfriends and girlfriends being with other people. It's just sex." Ah, the cry of the infidels. It's just sex. Ray had assumed it would come out at some point, and here it was, though he was surprised it had taken so long. His wife was willing to go so far to get her way, to have fun with her boy once a week. Ray suddenly realized it was pointless to argue. She would probably find a way to do it regardless of his opinion or feelings. Everything that had gone before was gone, and it was never coming back. He looked at Josie, who was watching him expectantly. "It's like this, Josephine. Majority rule. I think you'll get what you want." His wife's face lit up as if her fondest wish had come true, and perhaps it had. Ray just turned and walked toward the front door. He only made it a few steps before he heard his wife's voice calling his name. He hoped that maybe she had changed her mind after seeing how it affected him and turned to face her. But that didn't happen. "Can I tell Luke you were joking about the body bag?" "Sure, whatever you say. I'll take the car." "But Dad," Leo exclaimed, "it's already time to go to the fireworks." "Go without me," Ray replied. "I don't want to go anymore." It was quiet as Ray walked out the front door, but as soon as the door closed, he heard the sounds of celebration. He looked back through the front window. The blinds were open and the curtains were dangling, and saw Josie being hugged by all her supporters. It looked as if they were in league against him. Next chapter. Before the mini-fest was over, Josie was already on the phone to her lover. She assured him that she and Ray had discussed everything and he had withdrawn his objections. She wanted to make sure he hadn't left for another woman, and that she could still expect him to visit on Saturday morning. He picked up the phone on the third ring and assured Josie that he would be there and looked forward to seeing her. With those words, the family piled into the car and headed out to watch the city's always spectacular fireworks display. They talked and laughed, glad that the unpleasantness was behind them and confident that Ray would be all right, that he would understand, that it wouldn't affect anything. At the very moment Eric was parking the car, ironically, Ray's absence from the party had allowed them to take one 7-seater car rather than 2 separate ones, making them a family and him an outsider, though no one noticed the connection. Ray was sitting alone in his car, admiring the view of the city. He'd found this road into the nearby hills years ago and came here when he needed to think. He grimaced at the support Josie received from everyone in the family. He'd thought at least one of them would recognize that his inability to work was no reason for his wife's infidelity. But they were united against him, and it hurt. He felt like an outsider, like he was old and rejected. It reminded him of stories he'd heard as a child, of how some communities sent their old men to certain death when they thought they were too old or infirm to contribute, and thus just taking away resources. He just got in the way and was driven out. All he wanted to do was sleep, but sleep got in the way. It was past midnight when he finally returned to the house. He noticed that his daughter and Josie's car was still here, but everyone else had already left. He could only assume that the sound of the klaxon signaling that the car was locked alerted the occupants of the house, because as he approached, the front door opened. It was Josie. "Where have you been? I was so worried." Ray simply walked past his wife without saying a word. He noticed his daughter sitting on the couch, watching him with interest. "Why are you here?" he asked. "Mom was worried when you were gone after the fireworks. Everyone else had somewhere to go tomorrow morning, so I stayed with her. You could have at least answered the phone." Ray looked at his phone and remembered that he'd turned it off when he'd gotten to the mountain. He didn't want to be disturbed. "Well, as you can see, I'm fine. You can go home now." Christine was stunned. Her father was the kindest and most polite man she had ever known, and she had never known him to speak to anyone like that, much less to her, his little girl. She watched him as he walked to his bedroom until the door closed between them, then picked up her purse from the table and kissed her mother goodbye. By the time Josie finished packing and entered the room, Ray was asleep. Next chapter. For the whole of the next week, the house was quiet. Josie knew that, despite her tacit agreement, Ray wasn't thrilled with what she was doing with Luke. But she believed he could get over it because he loved her, and she was sure that in time he would forget about it, or at least put it out of his mind. For Ray, it was a complete ruin of his life. He had been a devoted family man for 4 decades, but that didn't stop his entire family from casting him aside when his presence became inconvenient. The simple fact that Josie had even sought support from her family over his infidelity had ended his marriage, Ray thought. The fact that all of them, every single one of them, had turned against him was the death knell for his family, or at least for him to be a part of it. For years, he had put everyone else first. That was about to change now. As he had every Saturday morning for the past several years, Ray got in his car and drove to the country club to meet his foursome. It was a group of 8 older men who booked 2 golf outings each and then mixed foursomes each week. Ray struggled to concentrate on his game, knowing what was going on in his house, and he had no doubt what was going on. It wasn't his worst performance, but it was his worst in a long time. He tried to smile at the good-natured taunts, but it wasn't easy. Next chapter. Meanwhile, Josie, back at her house, watched Ray get into his car and head out for a 7 a.m. golf game. She tried to express her affection and kiss him goodbye, but he remained silent. She hated to realize that her husband had been hurt, but she put it out of her mind as soon as Luke pulled up to the walkway. She asked him to park at the end of the street and around the corner. She thought parking in front of the house was too blatant and would attract the attention of the neighbors, but there was nothing she could do about him coming to the door. She let him knock before opening the door and then invited him in. And then Luke easily picked Josie up in his arms and carried her into the bedroom. By 12:30, Josie was more than satisfied that her home was in pristine condition and ready for her husband, who should be home at any moment. She had her needs met and was ready to devote her full attention to Ray for the rest of the week. He usually came home between 12:30 and 1 p.m. When he didn't show up by 2 o'clock, she became concerned, but not too concerned yet. By 3 o'clock, she became concerned and tried calling his cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. By 5 o'clock, after making several calls and sending several texts with no response, she began to worry. Finally, at 7 o'clock, after sitting for another 2 hours with no response from her husband, she called her daughter. She explained the situation, and within minutes, Christine and her husband were in the living room with their granddaughters, Josie. Eric drove to the country club to get some information. All they could tell him was that Ray had been there and left a few hours ago. Christine called the police and found out that there was no record of any incidents involving Ray, and that they could not file a formal missing persons report at this time. But they would write down his name in case they knew anything. Christine thanked them and hung up, unsure if anything would work. There was no one else to call. Josie didn't know any of the men he played golf with, not to mention she didn't have any of their phone numbers. There was nothing left to do but wait. It was nearly 11 o'clock at night when Julia, sitting at the front of the house, reported that she had just seen headlights in the driveway. Sensing that a confrontation was imminent, she and her sister hid in Mom's old upstairs bedroom. Eric, who was always up early, had long since tucked himself away in Leo's old room. Only Josie and Christine remained to meet Ray. Ray walked through the front door, not surprised to see his wife breathing fire in the hallway, and only a little surprised to see his daughter in the living room. He'd seen her car outside, but thought she might be leaving her and Josie alone together. She must be supporting her mother in her strange position with all her might. "Where have you been?" hissed Josie. "Playing golf," Ray replied calmly. "Not for more than 12 hours, you weren't." "That's true. After golf, I had lunch at the clubhouse. The piccata chicken they have is very good. Then I went to see a new movie with Dwayne Johnson. It's a little formulaic, but I liked it. After that..." "Damn it, Raymond. I don't want to know all the places you went." "Well, you asked me where I've been," muttered Ray. "I want to know why you didn't come home after golf like you usually do, and why you didn't answer the phone." "I didn't answer the phone because my phone never rang," he replied, showing his wife that his phone was off. "And I didn't come home because I wasn't going to be in this house at the same time as your buddy." "That's ridiculous, Raymond. Nothing has changed. We were done, and I cleaned the whole house long before you were done playing golf. You had no reason to come home late at all, let alone be gone all day." "That's how you look at it, Josephine. I just wasn't going to risk even being exposed to its consequences. Let me reiterate that I will not be in this house at the same time. It's getting late, and I'm going to bed." Ray walked past his wife, gave his daughter a hard look, but said nothing as he made his way to the bedroom. He expected one of the women to follow him, but none of them did. As he prepared for bed, he heard other voices in the hallway and realized that Christine's entire family had gathered in the house. Great. By the time Josie said goodbye to everyone and went into the bedroom, Ray was already asleep, or at least pretending to be asleep. Josie couldn't be sure. She wondered if she should wake him up so they could talk some more, but instead, she just went back to bed. Next chapter. The next weekend went much the same way, although this time there were no calls or texts. Josie just accepted the fact that Ray would be gone all day and took the opportunity to get the house in order. When it got late, however, Josie began to worry that she would be home alone, so she called Christine, who agreed to come over and keep her company until Ray got home. Eric and their daughters stayed home. Ray arrived again around 11:00 and was surprised to see Kristen's car parked at the curb. He wondered if another confrontation was looming. He walked through the door, but was met only with a pleasant greeting from his wife, a kiss on the cheek, and a smiling daughter in the background. "Why don't you get changed, honey? Then you can tell me what you've been doing all day," Josie said, leaving Ray somewhat confused. Josie headed to the kitchen to get everyone a drink, and Ray headed to the bedroom to change. The only conclusion he could draw was that she had been well taken care of by her lover tonight, so she was in a particularly relaxed and good mood. He changed into his pajamas and returned to the living room, where Christine looked like she was ready to leave, but appeared to be waiting for him. "Dad, I know this is hard for you, but I just wanted to say how great it is that you're showing your love for Mom by letting her do this. It really does make a difference." By letting her? Ray thought. Is that really how they see it? "Now I want to say something to you, Christine. This is the last conversation we'll have on this subject. The last one. Make sure everyone knows that." "Of course, Dad, I understand. It's hard to get it out of your head if people keep talking about it. I'll tell everyone." With those words, she kissed her father on the cheek and left. A moment later, Josie walked in with drinks for both of them. It seemed to Ray that she hadn't been brought drinks for a long time, and he wondered if it was planned so Christine could tell him how wonderful he was. Next chapter. It went on like this for several months. Josie continued to enjoy her physical relationship with Luke, and Ray found new things to do. He still played golf every Saturday morning and, of course, watched all the movies that interested him, but he also tried to diversify his activities. He bowled, miniature golfed, and even tried his hand at arcade games. He wasn't very good at anything, but he enjoyed himself. Life at home was quite normal, though the subject of Luke was carefully avoided. They had dinner together every night and had pleasant, albeit ordinary, conversations. The intimacy they shared had changed. Josie, believing that her relationship with Luke had no effect on her marriage, continued to express her love and affection to her husband, and if she noticed that he rarely reciprocated, she said nothing. Perhaps Josie had simply gotten too comfortable with the situation. Perhaps the fact that Ray didn't talk about Luke at all led her to believe that he was more comfortable with it than he really was. Whatever the case, when Thanksgiving came, Ray was in for a shock. "Mom, Luke's here." It was Christine calling from home. Ray was sitting in his chair reading the newspaper, yes, the print version, very old school, when he heard the message. If he had been drinking anything, he would have splashed it on the floor. "Oh, good," remarked his wife. "He hasn't decided exactly what's coming yet." Ray pulled the lever that lowered the footrest and jumped, as best he could, off the chair, which got Josie's attention. "What the hell is he doing here?" hissed Ray, thoroughly annoyed. "I invited him over for Thanksgiving," Josie replied, as calmly as possible. "He has no family in town and nowhere to go. I told you I wouldn't be in this house at the same time as him. You know that's why I'm not home all day on Saturdays. And now you're inviting him to my house for a family reunion?" "It's my house too, Raymond, and he doesn't come here for fun. It's no different than when the kids were growing up and their friends came over. It's just a dinner party, and I expect you to be on your best behavior." Josie turned and headed for the front door to greet her guest, effectively dismissing her husband and proud of herself for standing up for her. Well, sure, they were lovers, but she also considered Luke her friend, and she thought it was a perfectly appropriate gesture towards a friend. She met Luke at the door and introduced him to her children and their spouses and granddaughters. Taking his hand, she led him into the living room to greet her husband. She started talking before she even rounded the corner. "Luke, you remember my..." But Ray was gone, or at least not the chair he'd occupied just a few minutes ago. She looked around but didn't see him, and assumed he might have gone to the restroom. She started to get ready for the bedroom when she heard the garage door opener motor humming. She walked to the kitchen and garage door just in time to see the door start to lower and Ray's car pull away. "Was that Daddy driving away?" asked Christine to her mom. "Yes, that was him." "Where is he going?" "Who knows?" Josie replied in desperation, stomping toward her bedroom to gather her thoughts. Luke approached Christine as Josie was closing her bedroom door. "Is there anything I can do? Would it be better if I left?" he asked. "No, Luke, it's okay. This is your father's problem, not yours. You're always welcome here." "I just don't want to be the cause of trouble, but if you're sure..." "We know, Luke, and we appreciate it." The family and Luke chatted over their meal. Luke, as a new person, was the center of attention, but he showed interest in the family as well. After the meal, he joined Leo and Eric to watch soccer while the ladies went shopping. No one noticed Ray's car drive by. The festivities were long over. It was nearing 10 p.m. The house had been cleaned, the dishes washed. The ladies had returned from a shopping trip with a few items, but nothing major. Leo and Eric had fallen asleep on the couch and Ray was still nowhere to be seen. Christine woke her husband and children and told them to go home, intending to wait for her mother and stay the night. She always kept a few things here, nightgowns and a change of clothes, so that she could spend the night at her parents' house if necessary. Leo and Rebecca left as well, and Christine stayed behind to wait with her mom. Ray finally arrived at almost midnight. He hoped Josie had already gone to bed, but she was waiting for him. She started toward him, but instead of stopping like he usually did, he just walked past her. He walked over to his chair and continued reading the paper, as he had been doing before he was interrupted. If he thought Josie would back off, he was wrong.
Where have you been all day?
She practically shouted.
Sudden.
I went to Denny's for Thanksgiving dinner and then spent the rest of the day at the movies. We had a lovely dinner right here, Raymond. Why on earth would you go to the Denny's? It's not about the food, Josephine. It's about the company. I can't believe a 64-year-old man can't be polite to a guest I invited into our home. I would never treat someone you invited like that. I told you I would not be in this house at the same time as him, ever. I didn't mean only when he's here to take care of your so-called needs. I meant whenever, and you knew that, but you did anyway. It was just dinner, Ray. Maybe for you, Ray said, and then lifted the paper between them, signaling the end of the conversation. There was about 5 minutes of silence before Christine, his own daughter and apparent traitor to the cause, knelt down on the floor beside him. Daddy, please try to understand that he means a lot to her. She doesn't love him or anything, but she cares about him, and she didn't want him alone at the party. And you don't see a problem with Mom's boyfriend becoming a member of the family? He's not a member of the family, Dad, but he's a person in her life, just as much a friend as anyone else. Ray knew this was a lost cause. Of course, Christine. I understand. I hope you do, Dad. I'll see you later. Kissing him on the cheek, Christine left. Josie didn't show up again that evening, and when Ray finally got up from his chair and went to the bedroom, she was already asleep. Next chapter. Thanksgiving was a turning point, at least in some respects. The displays of affection were almost non-existent. Ray and Josie had become more like roommates than anything else. Josie felt entitled to take a lover because Ray was failing at his job, and viewed Ray's reaction as selfish and dictated by selfishness. Ray, on the other hand, saw Josie's choice as a betrayal of their marriage and life together. He had managed to treat her kindly and they had communicated in the way they needed to, but the love that had been built over a 40-plus year relationship was fading. When Josie said she needed to do some last-minute shopping the night before Christmas, Ray didn't say anything back, even though she hadn't needed to do any last-minute shopping in years. He knew where she was going and he didn't need to follow her or track her cell phone. The look in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. Whether she just wanted to exchange gifts or wanted something more, he didn't know, but he knew she would have a private holiday with him. On New Year's Eve, Ray did kiss his wife at midnight. Josie was disappointed that she didn't get to tell Luke anything, but she did call him the next day to wish him a happy new year. Ray had planned a nice dinner at an upscale seafood restaurant in anticipation of Valentine's Day, and Josie was excited at the prospect of the holiday. It gave her the idea that perhaps her husband was coming back to her. But Ray was tormented by a vague suspicion. Josie's desire to spend the holidays with her lover made him think of Valentine's Day. After all, it's Valentine's Day, and Ray doubted Josie would let him spend it without seeing Luke. So he decided to leave the office for a while and stake out his house. He parked at the end of the street so he could get a good view of the front door and the surrounding streets. Sure enough, he saw Luke park around the corner and walk down the sidewalk. Ray half expected him to just go inside, but he knocked and waited for Josie to let him in. Ray doubted they were just going to talk. This was their private Valentine's Day celebration. Obviously, they weren't just buddies anymore. Dinner that night was low-key. Josie had gone to it with a positive attitude and hope for a renewed relationship with her husband, but the uplifted mood he had displayed over the past few days was gone. Josie was disappointed but tried to accept it, wondering what could have caused such a change. When they didn't have small children, Easter was mostly just an excuse for a big family dinner. They'd hide a few eggs around the yard, but they were big plastic eggs, and they usually had a gift card or something in them. It was just a little fun to get into the holiday spirit. To Ray's relief, Luke wasn't invited, or at least he didn't show up. Josie had at least honored that request since that Thanksgiving, but Ray knew she had come to see him on other days besides Saturday morning, and probably more often than he'd realized. She'd arranged it for Valentine's Day and could certainly do it on other days as well. After the morning festivities were over, Ray announced that he was going to lie down. True, he was a little tired, but nothing he couldn't handle. He just wanted to avoid dealing with the family that had betrayed him. He couldn't avoid them altogether, but he could limit the amount of time he spent with them. It was a beautiful day, and he opened one of the windows that overlooked the backyard. A cool breeze blew into the room. Unfortunately, so did Josie and Christine's conversation. "So, how's Luke?" he heard his daughter ask. "Shh, not too loud. I don't want your father to hear." "Good, good," Christine replied, lowering her voice, but still loud enough for Ray to hear her. "I just can't believe my mom has a boyfriend 10 years younger than me." "He's not my boyfriend, Christine. He's just..." "Come on, Mom. You have fun with him 2 or 3 times a week, and you two also go out to dinner. You may not want to use the word boyfriend, but he still is." "Okay, fine. He's my boyfriend. I just want to be considerate of your father's feelings." "I know, Mom, and I love Dad too, you know that, and I don't want him to get hurt. But let's be honest, he's an old man, and you're a young woman." "He's only 5 years older than me, Christine." "In physical age, yes. But you're an active woman, and he can barely get through a day without sleeping. You've earned it. Frankly, I'm a little jealous that you can start dating again." "Does anyone else know? I mean, it's not just Saturday morning?" "Leo, Eric, and Rebecca know. I don't let the girls in on it." "Does everyone agree with that?" "Leo and Eric don't see it as a problem. They agree with me that you should be allowed to fulfill your needs since Daddy can't do it. Rebecca is the only one who thinks it's wrong, but she doesn't want Daddy to get hurt, so she promises she won't say anything. What Daddy doesn't know won't hurt him." Listening to the depths to which his wife's betrayal had sunk, and how the daughter wholeheartedly supported her mother's having a boyfriend, ignoring what she said about him, Ray felt the last vestiges of love and affection for them leave his heart. Although he had made many preliminary preparations, but because of his love for his family and his long marriage to Josie, he had not gone too far. Now it was time to begin the final process in earnest. Ray slowly closed the window and climbed into bed. Next chapter. Over the next few months, Ray's relationship with his wife and daughter deteriorated. Things were no better with his son and son-in-law, but he tried to mend his relationship with Rebecca and his granddaughters based on Christine's words about Rebecca and his belief that the granddaughters were simply too young to understand the situation. Mother's Day. Every family has its own traditions. For this family, Mother's Day was organized in the form of a sumptuous brunch at a local French-inspired restaurant. The food and service were excellent, and the prices reflected that. When the children were young, Ray took his family to celebrate Mother's Day and his wife. When the kids got older and started working, they took charge of the celebration. They did the same for Father's Day. This family was different from most in that the other parent did not participate in the celebration. Years ago, Ray stopped going to Mother's Day, and Josie stopped going to Father's Day. They let the kids celebrate with the respective parent and express their feelings later. But Ray had some sort of premonition, triggered by the events of the past few months. So while he usually used his free time to read or do something else, this morning he got dressed and drove to the restaurant. Josie had been gone for about 30 minutes, so he knew she'd be there. He wasn't going to participate in the brunch or even make anyone aware of his presence. Moreover, he doubted he'd even have to get out of the car. He walked across the restaurant parking lot, easily finding Christine and Eric's car, then Josie's car, then Leo and Rebecca's car. He was beginning to hope he was wrong, until he saw what he was looking for, but hoped he wouldn't find, nestled in the corner of the parking lot. Luke's car. Ray had seen it enough times and memorized the license plate number. His wife, or maybe his daughter, had invited a lover, boyfriend, whatever, of his wife to attend a family function, knowing Ray wouldn't be there. Despite everything that had been done so far, and the fact that Ray's love for his wife had essentially faded, this new betrayal made him furious, and whereas before he had intended to restrain his actions, Now he had no such intentions. Ray went back to his house, grabbed his golf clubs, and headed to the local golf course. He took a few strokes, losing count. By the end, he was exhausted. The strokes weren't getting very far or very accurate, but he felt better. He drove home, going to take a nap. They thought he was useless, unable to make it through the day without sleep. He let them continue to think so. Josie met him when he walked in the door. He wondered if she was having a private celebration with her boyfriend, though he didn't really care anymore. It still hurt, but that was different than caring. As he entered the house, he wondered if she'd admit to inviting Luke over if the opportunity presented itself. "How did you celebrate Mother's Day with your family?" asked Ray, putting a slight emphasis on family. "It was wonderful, Ray. Thank you for asking. I had a wonderful time with the kids," Josie replied. She didn't mention Luke. Did that mean that she and the rest of the family considered him family, or did she just choose not to mention him? Ray decided he would never find out. He went to his bedroom and dozed off. Next chapter. Soon it was the 4th of July again. Josie was always in a good mood, and Ray knew why, of course. He had been here for almost a year now, and no doubt Josie thought she had succeeded. She had a husband to support her, and a young boyfriend she met with a few times a week. Her life, in her opinion, was almost perfect. Luke had taken a new job where he worked evenings, which allowed him to spend a few daytime hours a week with Josie. It didn't pay much, but she wasn't with him for the money. Not wanting to wipe Ray's nose, to be completely honest, she just didn't want to get caught. They avoided Josie's bedroom on all occasions except Saturday mornings. That meant they used Luke's apartment or rented from friends if that option wasn't available. After all, he had roommates. The hardest part for her was excluding Luke from participating in activities. She didn't bring it up with Ray again and didn't think he would change his mind. It was the only thing she was unhappy about. She had hoped in the beginning and continued to hope now that Ray and Luke could become, if not friends, at least buddies. They gave her different things to do, so they couldn't compete, in her opinion. She spent her days with Luke, and her evenings and weekends, well, almost all of them, with Ray. She couldn't see why it wouldn't work together. So she reluctantly invited Luke over for a family barbecue and a trip to the fireworks. The family arrived early to help prepare the food. Ray tried to be conspicuous and active, so there would be no doubt later that he was tired. He kept a close eye on the crowd, wondering if Josie would sneak Luke in, but he never showed up. As the day went on, Ray pretended to get more and more tired. Okay, not all of it was pretending, but a lot of it was definitely. Maybe he was faking it too thick, because Josie seemed to notice it and walked over to him. "Honey, why don't you lie down to rest before the fireworks?" she suggested softly. The hardest part about this whole situation was that he knew Josie loved him and genuinely cared for him, and that made it even harder to do what he was about to do. "I'm not going to the fireworks, so I thought I'd just enjoy the day with my family and go to bed early," Ray replied. "Are you sure about that? You missed them last year, and before that you always looked forward to them," Josie remarked, genuinely concerned that he was missing them again. "I'm sure I do. I guess I'm just getting old. But I'm sure everyone will have fun without me." "Good if you're sure." As soon as she left him, Josie immediately went in search of Christine. Ray watched her as she made her way through the crowd, searching for their daughter. Josie, he suddenly realized, was trying to find out if he was going to attend the fireworks show, and there was only one reason why that would be a priority. She planned to invite Luke to join them for the fireworks. Not that it mattered, but the latest betrayal hurt. As the evening wore on, the guests began to disperse until only family members remained. Josie, Christine, Leo, and Eric stopped by at one point to ask if he was sure he didn't want to join them for the fireworks, and all expressed that they would miss him when he said he was staying home. Ray saw that this was the case and realized that his family was lost to him. As the family prepared to leave for the fireworks display, Ray swallowed his anger and made an effort to talk to each family member. No matter what had happened over the past year, he had many fond memories of their time together, and he would miss those times. Most of all, he hugged his granddaughters. Ray watched melancholically as the family happily climbed into Christine's minivan. It was clear that no one missed him. He put them out of his mind and went on about his business. Next chapter. The family returned a little later than usual, so Josie could have some alone time with Luke. He thanked them for the invitation, especially since he had no family or loved ones nearby. Although no one but Josie spent much time with him, they had come to consider him a member of the extended family and were thrilled at how happy he made Josie. They said goodbye in the park, as he obviously couldn't go back to the house with them. Once inside the house, they tried to be quiet, not wanting to disturb Ray. They poured drinks and gathered around the dining room table to socialize a bit. It was probably 45 minutes before Josie remembered Ray and asked her son to go check on him. Leo obediently got up from the table and slowly walked to the bedroom. He didn't find Ray asleep in bed, but he did find the covers pulled back, revealing white sheets underneath. Josie had always insisted on white sheets. On those sheets, Leo discovered Ray's wedding ring and a flash drive. It didn't bode well. "He's not there," Leo said as he left the bedroom. "What do you mean he's not there?" his mother asked. "No reason, Mom. No one slept on the bed, and I found this on the sheets next to his pillow." Not fully believing her son's words, Josie went into the bedroom and looked for herself. It was true. The bed was unused, and her husband was nowhere to be seen. When she returned to the living room, Eric was already plugging the flash drive into the laptop to see what was on it. When the files came into view, there was only one file listed, although it was quite large. Eric glanced at his mom, and she answered him with a nod. He double-clicked on the file. The computer's video player came to life, and Eric unfolded the image to the full screen. At first, it was just a blank wall, but they could hear voices. After a few seconds, Ray walked over to the camera. "Is it recording?" he asked the unseen cameraman. "Yes," a female voice replied. Ray looked at the camera. "Good evening, everyone. If I timed it right, you're watching this a little after 10 p.m., having just returned from the fireworks display." Everyone reflexively looked at the nearby clock and saw that it was almost 11 o'clock because they hadn't bothered to check on Ray when they got home. Right now, as you're watching this video, I'm sitting on an airplane that's flying through the air and won't land until it's well outside of the United States. In case you're wondering, I'm not coming back. "No!" screamed Josie, bursting into tears. "You betrayed me!" the video continued. "Every single one of you. My wife, who had my love and support for over 40 years, who never had to work a day in her life other than raising our children, discarded me like garbage for a guy half my age just because he's fun to be with. And when I had the nerve to object, she turned the whole family against me. I would have thought 40 years of loyalty, devotion, fidelity, and support would mean more to you, Josephine. I believe I have earned it. Your wants, and I think we all know they were actually wants, not needs. But your wants should have taken a back seat to my feelings. It was bad enough that you did it behind my back, but the fact that you got your family on your side was even worse. I felt like I had been stabbed 7 times in the heart that day. Christine, your betrayal was just as bad as your mother's betrayal. As a child, you were always Daddy's little girl. We did everything together. That you supported your mother in cheating on me, in adultery against your own father, broke my heart even more than what your mother did. Even if I hadn't heard you say that I was an old man who didn't deserve a faithful wife, my heart would have been broken completely. I didn't say that, said Christine aloud. Never. Leo, Eric, you must be the biggest idiots in the world. Do you realize that you just gave your wives permission to cheat on you? Leo, I doubt Rebecca is capable of that, but some of the things I've heard from my daughter should worry you, Eric. All she has to do is find a reason to claim you're not satisfying her, and she'll leave. She's already told her mother how jealous she is of her. Eric looked at Christine, who shook her head negatively as Ray's words poured from the speaker. No, baby, I've never said or done anything like that. It's not like you can object, Ray continued. You've already said that it's perfectly okay for Josie to do it, unless you meant that it's okay just because it's not you who's being cheated on. Isn't that right, Eric? You were totally okay with being cheated on? I bet when it's your turn, you won't be so cooperative. And I'm willing to bet that Christine is already in denial that she would do something like that. But ask her, if she thinks it would be wrong for her, why was it okay for her mother? Her answer will be eloquent. Eric paused the video and looked at his wife. Did you say you were jealous of your mom? He finally asked. I don't remember exactly what I said. All I know is that I was glad my mom would be able to go through this phase of a new relationship and getting to know you. So you want to get to know someone again? Continued Eric. No, baby. Please don't think about it too much, okay? I love you and I don't want to be with anyone else. Unless I can't perform, right? Honey, can we talk about this later? Right now, we need to focus on Mom. Okay, but this isn't over. Eric hit the play button again, and Ray continued. I didn't want to stay in a marriage where my wife cheated on me every week, and I certainly wasn't going to stay when I found out it had escalated to several times a week. I'm sorry, Josephine, but you weren't as careful and delicate as you thought you were. And inviting him to Mother's Day? That was just tasteless. As you might expect, I have no intention of telling you where I've gone, but I can assure you that even if you find me, there's nothing you can do about it. I should also mention the financial situation I left you. I have taken most of our money, as I intend to live the rest of my life in retirement as a reward for putting everyone else first for most of my adult life. Josephine, I left you a house that you know is paid off and worth several $100,000. My attorney will contact you and help you finalize the sale, if that is what you want. I also left about $400,000 in the bank. That's $10,000 for each successful year you've given me. I'm afraid there will be no credit for the last 12 months. None of you have to worry about me. By taking the rest of my assets, including my investment accounts, I've got a nearly 8-figure bank balance, so I'll be fine. Not that I really think any of you will worry. I think the way I've been treated over the last year clearly shows how you all feel about me these days. Oh, and if you're worried about me spending my golden years alone, you don't have to worry about that either. I already have a companion, and she's sitting next to me on the airplane right now. But let me introduce you. Deborah? A face matching the woman's voice appeared from behind the camera and stepped over. Everyone, this is Deborah. She'll be helping me spend your inheritance. Hello, everyone, said an attractive brunette who looked to be in her mid-50s, waving back at the camera. Deborah and I have been keeping close company for about the last 4 or 5 months, after I told her what my wife was up to. Nothing much, just spending a lot of time together and making sure how well suited we are for each other. But Josephine, you probably remember Deborah. You've met her several times. We've worked together for over 30 years, since she was hired in the marketing department. She took early retirement to join me in my new home. We have been close friends all this time, and the best part is that her needs are nothing more than a desire for intimacy. Hugs, kisses, and probably a few other things of a personal nature are more than adequate for her. I'm looking forward to it. Everyone looked at Josie to see how she took this revelation, and it was clear from the look on her face that she didn't take it well. Eric paused the video. Mom, are you okay? Asked Leo. No, Leo, I'm definitely not okay, but let's just get this over with. Eric started the video again. Josephine, said Ray, his tone becoming more serious. I've loved you since the day we met. If anyone had told me you could treat me like that, I would have knocked them out before they finished talking. I was looking forward to spending our last years together, having our children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren visit us. I am so disappointed that your physical desires ruined that for us, for me. For your sake, I hope it was worth it. You should have enough money to last you a long time, especially if you sell the house. If you need more, I'm sure the children who supported your affair will be willing to support you financially too. Now that I think about it, it was my money that got them through college and into good jobs, so I guess I have some credit for that. I wish I understood what was so important about having a few orgasms that led you to do what you did. It had been a terrible year, and it was getting worse. I knew about at least some of the extra sessions you had with him every week. I could have ended it months ago, but I liked the idea of declaring my independence on Independence Day, so I waited. I guess some part of me will always love you, or at least what we had. I wish things had been different, but somewhere halfway through you forgot that our marriage was we and not you and me. I've always tried not to make choices that would benefit me and hurt you like you did with Luke. I guess you thought I'd somehow accept that, maybe because I've always sacrificed myself for you before. I don't know. No matter what the reason, the deed is done, and it can't be undone. For your sake, I hope it was worth it. Goodbye, Josephine. I will miss you, and what we could have had. Ray looked directly into the camera as the screen faded. Everyone in the room was in tears, though some more than others. None of them thought Josie and Luke's relationship would push Ray away. He had always agreed with Josie in the past and thought that would be the case here as well. Deep down, no one thought he had the guts to do anything but accept it. Tired, they all stayed the night at Josie's house. She needed their support. Next chapter. Epilogue. Rebecca was cleaning the kitchen when the phone rang. It was only her husband, Leo, and some other unwanted calls calling her. She looked at the screen. The number was blocked. That seemed strange enough to her, so she decided to answer it. Hello? Rebecca, it's Ray. Oh my God, Ray, how are you? Where are you? I'm fine, Rebecca, just fine. I'll keep quiet about where I am for now. More importantly, how are you? I'm fine, Dad, but I have some news. I'm pregnant. Congratulations. How far along are you? Only a couple months. We found out right after you left. I can't believe you've been gone almost 3 weeks. Yeah, time flies. By the way, thanks for calling me Dad. I thought I'd lost that title. Not with me. You know, Dad, I owe you an apology. I should have spoken up. When everyone confronted you that day, and you asked for our opinions, I should have said I thought it was wrong. But I was a new member of the family and I was afraid. I had that feeling, but I don't think it would have made any difference. Josie and Christine seem to really want it to happen. Consider yourself forgiven. Thank you, Dad. It was very important to me, especially since I hope to have both of my child's grandfathers in his life. Ah, will you be in his life? We'll see, honey. I'm not going back to the States, but maybe we can work something out. I'd love to see you and the baby. Well, how is it going? In a word, strained. Josie's out of sorts most of the time, though that doesn't stop her from seeing Luke a few times a week. Christine and Eric are having problems. They're keeping things quiet, but I think your comments about her having an excuse to cheat on him hit a nerve. How are you and Leo? We're doing well. We're still just starting out in our marriage, so things are still fresh. I think Christine and Eric have been married for so long. I don't know. I guess it just makes them both more cautious. The girls, on the other hand, are just devastated. Really? That surprises me. You were always so close. They miss spending time with you. They still don't think a little casual sex is something serious, but they realize that having it when you're just dating is very different than when you're married. I understand. I saw Christine's clear influence when they answered. Look, you can get everyone together at your place tonight. I think I'm ready to talk to them. I don't think that will be a problem, Dad. We'll talk then. Next chapter. That evening, the whole family gathered in Leo and Rebecca's living room. Rebecca made it clear that Luke was not invited. She set out sandwiches and everyone ate a little, but was too preoccupied to eat much. At 8 o'clock, the phone rang and Rebecca put it on speaker. Hey, Dad, everyone's here. Thanks, sweetie. Just so everyone knows, Deborah is in the room with me too. Let's all try to be polite and make conversation instead of yelling. Agreed? The assembled family members expressed general agreement. Good. I thought we should talk, but I wanted to wait until some time had passed. Of course, I contacted Rebecca first. I did so because some of the things I overheard led me to believe that she wasn't as accepting of it as the rest of you. Leo, congratulations on the baby. Thank you, Dad. I'll try to live up to the standards of fatherhood you've set, and I'm not just saying that. As the saying goes, the best thing you can do for your children is to love their mother. Remember that, and you'll do well. Allison, Julia?
Yes, Grandpa,
His granddaughter said almost in unison. Girls, I was disappointed that you supported your grandmother in this, but your aunts Rebecca and Deborah convinced me that you may have been overly pressured and that you lacked the life experience to understand the dynamics of adulthood and a 40-year marriage. I still have your emails and phone numbers, so we'll talk about it later, if that's okay with you. Of course, Grandpa, Allison replied. We just miss you. I miss you too. Why don't you go find something to do while we all talk?
and
The girls said their goodbyes and went off to do their own thing. Before they left, though, they did stop and hugged their grandmother. So, Ray continued, does anyone have anything they're just dying to say? Ray, honey, please, Josie began, to no one's surprise. Please come back. We can get past this. If you had told me you were really going to leave me, we would have figured it out. Why did you have to go that far, Josephine? I told you I wouldn't accept it, and you turned to family for support. Then you started inviting him to family events and seeing him several times a week. You replaced me with him, at a time when you and I were barely roommates. You let it happen, and I finally got tired of it. But you never said anything else. I thought you'd accepted it, realized it was just something I did. It drove a wedge in our marriage, and there was no suggestion that it would lead to anything but that. From the moment I realized what you were doing, and you chose him over me, our marriage was doomed. I'm sorry, Ray. Can't we? No, Josephine, we can't. Even if I wanted to, which I don't, I made a commitment to Deborah, and I intend to honor it. What about your commitment to me? You took it first. Yes, I did, and I will still honor it. But as far as I'm concerned, when you broke yours, you released me from yours and allowed me to take a new one, which I did. Everything fell silent, and only Josie's sobs broke the silence. Josie, Ray spoke softly, I'm sorry, but there's no point in continuing this conversation. Whether you wanted to or not, you've cast me aside. There's no going back. Without another word, Josie stood up and left the room to take refuge in Christine and Eric's room. Kristen blurted out, That's very nice, Daddy. Did you call just to hurt Mom and make her cry? All because your ego couldn't handle another man making her feel better than you? I guess that's how you see it, Christine. Eric, how is your ego doing? Is it ready to accept that another man makes your wife feel better about herself than you do? Christine lowered her hands rather abruptly under her husband's intense gaze. Throughout their marriage, Christine had been the dominant one, and Eric, like many husbands, had gone along with her. But in the past few weeks, a significant shift had occurred, and Christine realized that her marriage was in serious danger. You can't support another woman's right to cheat on her husband without feeling guilty by association. No, Ray, that's definitely not true, and you were right. I never thought of it in those terms. My wife and I have some pretty serious problems after all this. I understand, and let me say this, for what it's worth. Fight for your marriage before it's too late. You love each other, but you've started to take each other for granted. I noticed this even before this whole mess started. Don't let it end, but let it be a catalyst for change. You are a team. Remember that. Josie didn't. There was a long silence, mostly because no one else had anything else to say at this point. Then, in a voice almost like a little girl's, Daddy, Christine said, is it okay if I talk to you alone? If it's okay with everyone else, it's okay with me. Christine looked around. No one objected, so she picked up the phone and retired to the spare room, closing the door. Dad, I'm scared. Eric was talking about divorce and at least counseling. What am I going to do? You're going to fix this, Christine. It's what you do. Your girls are grown up, at least for the most part. Now put the time you spent raising them back into your marriage. It's not free time like your mother thought it was. Remember that you are not his boss. You are his partner. He's really angry. Once he started looking at it as me giving myself free rein to cheat on him, he got so angry. He's constantly snapping at me, and I know he's wondering if I've already done something. Did you? No, Daddy, no. But I don't know how to convince him that I have. All you can do is to make sure you have no reason to be suspicious in the future. If you do that, the questions about the past should fall away. Dad, I'm really sorry. Isn't there some way you can fix this? I mean, you and Mom. It's too late for us, honey, but not for you. Okay, Daddy. I love you. I love you too. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.